Okay, so we're gonna be installing radiator brackets on the INEOS Grenadier. So this is a factory radiator mount. And what I mean by the radiators, it's the cooler is in the front bumper. The one on the passenger side is an auxiliary cooler for the radiator, and the one on the driver's side is a cooler for the transfer case. So what INEOS has done is they've just got a simple little bracket, comes out and it holds it with a single stud coming off the bottom. And then there's a framework around the cooler, and that framework is kind of pinned in. There's some rubber mounts in there. It works pretty decent, but what can happen is this will flex. It happened on me in the NOR 1000. It actually flexed down. The radiator popped out. Luckily, no damage was done, and came all the way back, actually back up the last day I drove with it with the radiator completely loose. Luckily, it didn't wear through it. But I've talked to some other global travelers. They've had this issue as well. Mainly long corrugated roads, such as like Africa, Australia. We've got another client that's traveling around the world with his family. He had the coolers come out. So what we've done is we just simply made this bracket here. This is the driver's side bracket. And so instead of it just mounting here with one bolt and coming up here to the cooler with one bolt, now we've got 3 bolts over here, triangulation, and a single mount here, just supporting the radiator. We just don't want that radiator to flex. So a lot heavier duty. We'll show you how to install these. They're similar on both sides. There's some slight differences between the driver's side and the passenger side. As well, you'll see that we've got clearance for additional lines, like for the winch line going through on the cooler on the passenger side of the vehicle. A pretty simple install. I did remove the wheels to make it a little bit easier for us to film, but this can probably be done in your driveway, just on your back. Okay, so the tools needed for this job, pretty simple. You're gonna need a T30, that removes the fender caps, a T40, that removes the bracket at the frame. You need a 13, that's for the nut underneath the cooler. A 16, we do use a sword extension on there, so it's easier to access it, but it's a 16. And then you're gonna need a panel popper. I don't know if the panel popper is listed in there, but that's to remove the 2 plastic plugs up top. Be careful, if you damage those panel poppers, you will need to replace them. They're not included in the kit, so just be careful when you're pulling them out. And then I cheat, I use my impacts. Okay, panel tool. There we go. Uh-oh, broke it. T30. $13mm wrench. So we're gonna tuck that underneath. And then when you go to put this guy in, you gotta kind of push on that bracket in. You do wanna be careful, it can strip pretty easily. So we're on the driver's side. There is a little clip here you're gonna wanna remove. This panel popper, I use that. And then we're gonna come up in here. Try and be careful, but you can see I constantly break those suckers, so. Oh, that's 2 for 2, awesome. So now our T30. And remove and out of your way. So save your hardware. We're gonna be reusing all that hardware. And then we're gonna come in here, we're gonna pull out this T40 here and the 1/2 inch there. Usually works best with a wrench on that. 13, sorry. And we will be reusing this bolt, not reusing this bracket. So here you can see how this bracket just kind of like sat in there, and it could easily just kind of like rotate, move around. And this whole unit here is pretty stout, but it's surprising that they do flex as much as they do. And it's rubber mounted. through the top and the bottom. There's pins on there, and then there's a rubber isolator. And what we're trying to do is just keep this from flexing down, because if it flexes down, it allows the cooler to pop out. And if the cooler pops out, then it sits and it rests in here, and when it's sitting here resting off-road, it can just get damaged. So we want to eliminate damaging that. The other thing you're going to notice that on mine, you see where this bracket just kind of pops right out. This can be a little difficult to get back in, and we'll show you that when we go to put it back together. This one's going to be a little bit of fishing up in there to get it into place. I'm going to remove that guy out of the way. It should make it a little bit easier. I'm going to fish this guy in here. You can see it's a little bit of a game getting it in there. Just give this a slight pull down on the bumper. Just slide that underneath and put it over the stud. Okay, but don't worry about putting the nut on. And then put all your bolts in before we tighten everything down. So we'll start with the 2 upper 10 millimeter bolts, which have a 16 millimeter head. Okay, those are started. You can go ahead and put on the nut just so we don't lose that, but we're not going to tighten down that nut. And what I do is I snug down the 8 millimeter or the T40 bolt first, but not tight. And I'm going to grab those 10 millimeter bolts, which are a 16 millimeter head. Tighten those all the way down. Make sure that this is not in like a major bind. And you're done. So your bracket's in place. You got plenty of clearance for everything. Let's go ahead and put this guy in, the hose back into that hole. We just temporarily removed that so he had a little bit better access for tightening stuff down. We're gonna run into a slight problem here, a little bit of an issue pulling this in tight. All right, so your last step, put this plate in. If you need to line up that bolt, in my case, I actually removed this part. I give it a little bit of a tweak, and I lined it right up. So I spent a little bit more time on that than I probably should have, but I can be that way. So tap it in underneath here and just start lining up your bolts. These are just like a 6 millimeter. These are the T30s. Get them all started before you tighten them down. Don't forget to clip this guy back on. This is only on the driver's side. You got to worry about this one. Keeps it away from the steering box. And then the last are my little Christmas trees. Pop those guys back in and you're good to go. So now you're well supported. Now it's time to hit the dirt. So happy trails, everybody.